Have you ever felt lost in life? The truth is, most lives are rehearsals, movement without direction, comfort mistaken for peace. The tragedy isn't failure, it's obedience, the slow death of potential, disguised as success. Every day looks right from the outside, productive, pleasant, predictable, but underneath, something rots. There's no fire, no hunger, no risk, just the endless performance of being fine. Nietzsche called this the sleep of the herd, the half-life of those who never dared to begin. And when that silence finally breaks, when the fiction collapses, that's when real life begins, not with a smile, but with a scream, a death, and a dangerous rebirth. Imagine this: you wake up, you check your phone, maybe a quick scroll, a little anxiety, a little jealousy, a few distractions, then off to whatever day is scheduled for you. Class, work, chores, maybe a few laughs, maybe a few stresses. And at night, a quiet moment hits. Not a breakdown, not a crisis, just a feeling that you're drifting, that this life is happening to you, not from you. Nietzsche saw this long before screens and schedules took over. He warned us about the eternal recurrence, a terrifying thought experiment. He asked, if a demon appeared and told you that you would have to live this exact life again and again, would you cry out in despair or rejoice in acceptance? Would you collapse under the weight of repetition, or would you feel joy knowing that this path is yours? It's not about literal reincarnation. It's about a test of whether you're actually choosing the life you live or just enduring it. Nietzsche knew most people wouldn't pass that test because they live in the numbness of obligation, not the fire of intention. Ask yourself, if you had to repeat today 1,000 times, would that feel like heaven or hell? If you've ever felt fake in your own skin, Nietzsche would understand, because he believed the self isn't something we discover, it's something we become. But the becoming, it's brutal. It requires destroying what is fake in us. Nietzsche called this destruction the act of the hammer, not a hammer that builds, a hammer that breaks, that shatters the illusions, the borrowed beliefs, the hand-me-down morals, the tired scripts, the good boy mask, the polite girl routine, the parts of you that were trained, not chosen. And once the hammer has cleared the rubble, then, and only then, can you build your life as art, not as performance. But this terrifies people, because it means becoming isn't a straight line. It's chaos, it's suffering, it's staring into the void of, I don't know who I am anymore, and still walking forward. But Nietzsche believed this was sacred. He said one must still have chaos in oneself to be able to give birth to a dancing star. If you feel confused, lost, broken, that's not the end of your story. It's the beginning, because only those who shatter can build something truly their own. But here's the darker truth most people never face. You can't become yourself until you first betray the version of you that kept others comfortable. There's a war inside you, right now, a silent war between the self that wants to fit in and the self that wants to break free. Nietzsche called it the herd instinct, the human urge to belong at any cost, to not be judged, to not be strange, to not stand out too much. We tell ourselves we're just being practical. We take the safe job, we speak when spoken to, we swallow the discomfort because that's just how life is. But slowly, piece by piece, the fire goes out. And we become something Nietzsche hated more than anything, comfortably mediocre. That's the worst kind of death, because it doesn't even make a sound. It just numbs you quietly, until you forget what passion felt like, until your instincts atrophy, until your hunger turns into scrolling, sipping, sleeping. You become tame, tolerable, predictable, and the world loves it because you're not a threat anymore. But what if your sadness isn't a flaw, but the last proof you're still alive, the last flicker of a self that refuses to be tamed? They tell you to be a good person, get a good job, keep your head down, be nice, be polite, be humble, follow the path, school, career, relationship, retirement. And if you do it well enough, you'll earn peace. That's the lie. Because peace doesn't come from obedience, it comes from confrontation. Nietzsche saw the danger in how society defines goodness. not as strength or creativity or defiance of injustice, but as quietness. He said, "The great epochs of our life come when we gain the courage to rebaptize our evil as what is best in us." What does that mean? It means maybe your anger, your wildness, your refusal to comply isn't evil. Maybe it's your first heartbeat of truth. Because there's a part of you that knows this good life isn't real. It's safe, sure, it's stable, but it's also suffocating. It's a performance of happiness, not the real thing. And if you're feeling dead inside while doing everything right, that's not a failure. That's evidence. Evidence that your soul refuses to be traded for comfort. Now, have you ever considered this? What if your deepest shame is actually your first glimpse of freedom? Nietzsche didn't just want you to rebel, he wanted you to create. Once the illusions fall apart, and once you smash the idols and masks and lies, then what? Then comes the most terrifying freedom of all. You are now the artist of your life. No blueprints, no instructions, no applause. Just you staring into the abyss with a brush in your hand. This is what Nietzsche called the path of the Übermensch, not a superior being in strength, but in authenticity, a human who creates their own values, their own rhythm, their own meaning, not borrowed from tradition, not imposed by culture, not faked for approval, but born painfully, messily, beautifully, from within. Most people avoid this at all costs, because it's easier to be a cog than a creator. It's easier to repeat what's been done than to risk doing what's never been tried. But Nietzsche knew that true joy doesn't come from comfort. It comes from becoming, from the raw power of looking at your life and saying, "I made this. Even the scars, even the pain, it's mine. And no one can take that from you. Not the system, not your family, not the culture, because what is real in you is untouchable." So ask yourself, if no one ever approved of your life, would you still want to live it? Nietzsche believed there's a death you must go through while you're still alive. A death of the false self, of the roles, of the masks. He wasn't trying to scare you, he was trying to wake you up. Because until you let that self die, you will never feel alive. There's a line Nietzsche wrote that cuts like a knife. One must die several times while still alive. And when he says die, he means this: let the you who was built by fear dissolve. Let the you who stayed quiet to avoid judgment disappear. Let the you who chased approval from parents, partners, followers be buried. Because only then can you be born, not once, but again and again and again. Not into perfection, but into something real. And yes, it will hurt. You will lose people, you will lose your place in certain circles. You might lose your sense of identity, but what you gain, it's worth everything. Because for the first time, your life won't feel like a costume. It will feel like you. So here's the real question. Are you ready to let that version of you die? Or are you going to keep performing until the real you disappears completely? Once the false self dies, what's left? Silence, emptiness, the terrifying echo of a life with no instructions. You don't know who you are yet, and the old roles don't fit anymore. This is where most people run back. Back to the job, the relationship, the identity that gave them a sense of control. Because the void, the nothingness, feels unbearable. But Nietzsche said, this is where life actually begins, not in comfort, but in chaos. Because this is where you decide what's sacred, what matters, what is worth suffering for. You're no longer inheriting meaning, you're choosing it. And that freedom is violent, because it forces you to admit something almost no one wants to face. Nothing has meaning unless you give it one. That's the raw material of truth. But it doesn't mean your life is meaningless. It means meaning is no longer handed to you by religion or school or culture. It's earned in blood, confusion, and radical honesty. The meaning you've been chasing only appears when you stop searching and start building. Most people hear Nietzsche's phrase, the will to power, and think it means domination, control, tyranny. But that's not what he meant. He wasn't talking about power over others. He was talking about power over yourself, the inner force that drives you to evolve, not for applause, not for status, but because you can't bear to stay small. The will to power is the refusal to be stagnant. It's the inner scream that says, "I will not die before I'm alive." It's the drive to write when you're afraid, to speak the truth when it costs you, to change your life when everyone says not to. It's not about force, it's about form, the form your soul wants to take. And that form can't be shaped by approval or tradition. It can only be shaped by courage, by choosing again and again to walk into the unknown and trust that your becoming will not betray you. When people talk about becoming your true self, they make it sound poetic, romantic, but they leave something out. Becoming hurts. It means dismantling who you were in front of people who still expect you to be that person. It means losing friends who only knew the mask. It means walking into rooms and realizing you no longer belong. There's a grief no one talks about, the grief of growing, because you're not just losing illusions, you're losing the life those illusions built, the job that wasn't really you, the relationship that fed your ego but starved your soul, the habits that numbed the pain but kept you from healing it. And every time you let go, a part of you dies. But something else stirs, a self that was never allowed to speak, a voice that isn't echoing others, but speaking from a deeper, rawer place. That voice is faint at first, but it gets louder the more you listen, and eventually it says something terrifying and beautiful. You are alone, but not lost. You thought freedom would feel light, but first it will crush you under everything you were never meant to carry. Nietzsche once said, "The higher we soar, the smaller we appear to those who cannot fly." This isn't arrogance, it's loneliness. When you rise, emotionally, spiritually, intellectually, fewer people understand you. Your pain stops being socially acceptable. Your thoughts become inconvenient. Your refusal to play along gets mistaken for coldness. But you're not being cold, you're being clear. And clarity is threatening in a world that thrives on confusion. You'll lose people, not because you changed, but because you stopped pretending. You'll sit alone on Saturday nights, not because you're unlovable, but because shallow company now feels worse than solitude. You'll walk alone, not because you're broken, but because the crowd is walking in the wrong direction. This is the silence of real power, and it's the silence that prepares you for real love, the kind of love that sees who you actually are, not who you perform. But that love will not find you until you're brave enough to be unseen. You're not lonely because you're wrong. You're lonely because you're waking up. There's a joy that doesn't look like joy. It's not pleasure. It's not relief. It's not the kind of joy you can photograph or post online. It's the quiet knowing that, for once, you didn't run. You sat with the pain. You faced the truth. You let go of the people who loved your performance but couldn't handle your realness. And somehow, through the tears and confusion, you feel more you than ever. This is the sacred joy Nietzsche pointed to. Not the joy of having, but the joy of being. It's the kind of joy that grows in scars, not selfies. It's earned. And once you taste it, the world's cheap pleasures lose their grip. You don't need to be admired. You just need to be true. Because truth, even painful truth, is freedom. And in that freedom, you finally breathe. You're not trying to be someone anymore. You just are. And that is the beginning of real life. Now ask yourself, if you weren't trying to impress anyone, who would you become? To live freely, something inside you has to die, and that something is obedience. Not the useful kind, not laws, not structure, not discipline. We're talking about the deeper obedience, the reflex to please, the instinct to submit, the internalized whisper that says, don't be too much, don't make them uncomfortable, don't break the pattern. That's the real chain, and it often sounds like your own voice, because obedience isn't just imposed, it's inherited. You absorbed it from parents who were too afraid to be themselves, from teachers who taught conformity, not curiosity, from a culture that rewards quiet compliance over wild authenticity. Nietzsche called this the morality of the herd. He saw how modern people, especially the good ones, were trained not to think, but to obey, to follow what's acceptable, to stay inside the invisible lines drawn by people long gone. But Nietzsche didn't believe in those lines. He believed in something else entirely, the power to create your own values, not to reject morality, but to go deeper than it, to build it from within. This is not the rebellion of a child. This is the recreation of a person. Nietzsche's most misunderstood idea is the Übermensch, the overman. He wasn't talking about a tyrant or a superhero. He was talking about someone who has crossed the desert of despair and emerged as their own authority. The Übermensch doesn't need applause. They don't need validation from society, religion, or tribe. They create their own values, not from ego, but from depth, and they live by them, even if no one else does. This is what scares people about real freedom. It demands everything. It demands that you let go of the safety net of shoulds. It demands that you stand alone, not in bitterness, but in fear, self-trust. And most people aren't ready for that. So they cling to systems that think for them. They outsource their truth to belief systems. They quote books they've never questioned. They live as echoes, never as origin. But Nietzsche's philosophy offers you a terrifying gift. You get to become the origin. You get to become the author, not just of your story, but of your truth. It's not your freedom that's scary. It's the silence that follows once you claim it. To create yourself is to walk into the fire, not once, not briefly, but again and again. Every old belief tested, every emotional reflex burned away, every dependency shattered. This is the furnace of transformation. Nietzsche didn't want comfort for you. He wanted strength. The kind of strength that comes from being tempered by reality, not protected from it. And yes, it's brutal. You will cry, you will lose people, you will doubt your sanity. But if you stay in the fire long enough, something unbreakable emerges. Not a persona, not a performance, but presence. The presence of someone who has died 100 deaths and came back every time more real. And here's the secret most people will never understand. You don't need to find yourself. You need to burn away everything that's not you, and what's left will shine. The fire doesn't destroy you, it reveals you. Nietzsche's answer wasn't denial. It was amor fati, the love of one's fate. Not just acceptance, love, not just endurance, a resounding yes to everything. To be clear, this isn't about being a doormat or romanticizing suffering. It's about taking everything life throws at you, the trauma, the injustice, the heartbreak, and folding it into your story as necessary. It's not, this shouldn't have happened. It's, this had to happen, so I could become who I am now. Because if you erase the pain, you erase the wisdom. If you cut out the betrayal, you lose the courage that rose from it. If you delete the darkness, you dim the light that had to fight its way through. Amor fati is not a philosophy of passivity. It's a battle cry. It says, I'm not a victim of life, I'm the author of its meaning. And meaning isn't found, it's made by the one brave enough to love their whole story. Maybe it's not your circumstances that need to change. Maybe it's the way you see them. So when does your real life begin? Not when you hit your goals, not when you feel healed, not when you find love, money, or peace. It begins the moment you stop waiting to be saved and start saying yes. Yes to the version of yourself you abandoned. Yes to the parts of your past you tried to forget. Yes to the terrifying freedom of no longer blaming, no longer begging, no longer bargaining with life. This is the great revolt Nietzsche spoke of. Not political, not external, but internal. A revolt against the lie that you are incomplete, against the pressure to conform, against the voice that says, not yet, not you. Your life doesn't begin with permission. It begins with fire, with refusal, with laughter in the face of absurdity, with a scream that turns into a song. And no one can do that for you. It has to be you right here, right now. So ask yourself, are you ready to be who you were before the world told you who to be? Are you ready to walk the path that only you can walk? Because once you take that step, there is no going back, and you won't want to. This is not a self-help video. It's a wake-up call. You weren't born to wait. You were born to become. If you are ready, show it by leaving a like and writing, "I am ready" in the comment. You don't have to walk blind anymore. Join the seekers, walking toward the light. Subscribe and click the notification bell to never miss new insights. Until next time, keep shining, not to be seen, but to see.